It's time for your daily LSU baseball update with Musso at the box. Now, Matt Musso.
And welcome into another edition of Musso at the Box. LSU welcomes in the Auburn Tigers to Alex Box Stadium for a three-game set as LSU looks to win back-to-back SEC series for the first time this season. We have you covered wall-to-wall here for this series. Today we will dive into a preview of LSU and Auburn, the two teams right now on the outside looking in for the SEC tournament in Hoover, although LSU just one game out of the final spot. Auburn considerably more work to do. So this series could very well have the flavor of desperation for a couple of these teams. We've talked plenty this week about how LSU looks to be turning the corner, taking steps towards playing their best baseball. We went through plenty of the positive trends that have really started to show in the last 11 games for LSU, and specifically the last 5, in which LSU has won 4 out of those 5. And now they welcome in an Auburn team that is dead last in a variety of different categories in the Southeastern Conference, but an Auburn team that has plenty of talent and plenty of good players to where you look at them and you just say, why are they as bad as they are? Because Auburn is bad. I mean, there's no way around that. They have 2 conference wins. You're heading into the 7th weekend of play. They're bad. Like, yes, they have guys. It's kind of like the conversation that we had about LSU for a large majority of the time. It's okay, you lost 5 straight conference weekends. You can't be considered good if you do that. You can get better, but you can't be considered good. It's kind of the same thing about Auburn. So we will go through plenty of those standout guys. We'll take a stab at pitching rotations. Just disclaimer right off the top, at the time of this recording, I don't have pitching rotations set, and Auburn's been a revolving door in their rotation really kind of throughout the season. That's part of the reason they're not good. That just hasn't even had a semblance of being set for the Plainsmen there. So, look, we'll take a stab. I've looked at trends and what they've done lately and things of that nature and where guys started and where they've moved, how roles have changed. So we'll take an educated guess, and we'll do the same thing for LSU, although I think LSU's is a little bit more cut and dry as to the way Jay Johnson goes about it. I'm not expecting to see much change there for Auburn. If we get a little series overview here for you before we get into everything, Auburn, they're the visiting team. They come in 20-20 overall off a run rule victory over Florida A&M in the midweek, 2-16 in conference play last, 14th. LSU, of course, comes in 26-16, coming off of a 9-0 midweek victory over Nichols. LSU 5-13 in the SEC, 13th in the standings. So let's kind of dive in a little bit more. Oh, one more thing. In lieu of an overall series history, let's talk about the recent series history. And we'll include this in the overview, and then we'll get deeper. Jay Johnson got to LSU in 2022. He has played Auburn in series, or I should say his teams have played Auburn in series twice. They are 0-2. LSU has lost both of those 2 out of 3. And in both cases, I think you would look at it and say LSU was the better team. Definitely last year. And I understand last year Auburn got hot down the stretch. They ended up hosting a regional. Fine. That series win over LSU was really a big catalyst for that. That was a big notch on their resume. But Auburn last year, when LSU went there, wasn't good. They had a sub-500 record in the league, all those type of things. When Auburn came to Baton Rouge in 2022 in Jay Johnson's first season, LSU won game 1 behind Mikhail Hilliard. LSU had a lead in the middle of the game. In game number 2, committed a brutal error. Actually, it might have been a couple errors in the 5th inning of that game, and it got away from them. And then, they were playing competitively in game 3, and they decided to pitch to Sonny DeShare, and he hit a ball off the friggin' batter's eye, and you lost that series. Yeah, I have a pretty good memory of that. I was pretty steamed that Monday on the podcast. I also remember that, especially about the DeShare home run, because we circled him. First base was open. Look, it was a 3-0 count. We're not getting into that again. But both of those times, I think you would look at it and say, okay, LSU should have and definitely had opportunity to win those series. and both of the times you didn't. And also both of the times you were the more talented, you were the better team. That same situation is here again in 2024. And yes, I know Auburn's not good, but because of what I've seen in the last 2 years, forgive me for not just crowning LSU, winning this series already. They're going to have to go out there and they're going to have to execute. This is one of the few teams that Jay Johnson has not beaten in a series yet at LSU in 2 years. You got Ole Miss, you've gotten State, Arkansas, A&M, Florida, Georgia. Kentucky was a super regional. You haven't played them in the regular season, but whatever. Tennessee, it's a lot of them. Auburn isn't one of them. You need to get over that hump here this weekend. Now, let's dive in a little bit more. Let's start with our projected, probable, I guess we could call it, starting pitching matchups. For LSU in game number 1, I would be pretty surprised if it's not Gage Jump. That's the leadoff they've gone with the last 2 weekends. Your game 1 started the last 2 weekends, and he's coming off of his best outing in college. He's coming off his career outing. I don't know why you would shake that up, why you would move that, so I imagine you don't. So I'm thinking it'll be Gage Jump. He will start a game this weekend, obviously, and when he does, it'll be appearance 11, start 10. He's 3-1 with an ERA just over 4.2, 42 2/3, 16 walks, 57 strikeouts. The opponent hitting just 216 off the Tiger lefty. We know what we saw from him last week. 7-inning, complete game, 1 earned, 14 strikeouts, career high, career outing, like we said. Gage Jump, I don't think is going to replicate that. And I don't think it's fair to ask him to replicate that. What you want to see, though, is some semblance of consistency, and you want to see him build off of that. Can Gage Jump go out there and get you 5 1/3, maybe 6 innings, give up two runs or so and strike out 7 or 8 and limit the walk number again and all of those things? If he does that, that's a step towards consistency. That's a major step in the right direction, and it helps solidify the front of your rotation with somebody not named Luke Holman. And that would be just I don't think you can understate how big of a step forward that would be for this baseball team. So that's what you're looking for out of Gage Jump. He's been better at the box than he has been on the road, but he's coming off that start on the road where he was that guy. He was that dude. National Pitcher of the Week, Gage Jump. So, again, I don't expect you to disrupt rhythm. I don't expect you to disrupt routine or anything like that, especially coming off of an outing like he had. So, I'll project Gage Jump gets the start for LSU in game number 1. For Auburn, we kind of mentioned it. Auburn's been in and out of their rotation. They've had guys move in, move out, different roles here, different roles there. The last 3 weeks, they've used Dylan Watts, a right-hander, as an opener. Just quite honest, that's what he's been. He's been an opener for them the last 3 weeks. That'd be against Tennessee, Kentucky, and Mississippi State. 2 out of those 3 games, Auburn was right there. They beat Tennessee using Watts as an opener. They lost by 1 run to Kentucky using Watts as an opener, and then they kind of got run off the field against Mississippi State, but it wasn't his fault. The bullpen blew it. He only gave up 2 runs in 4 innings. That was his longest outing of the season by far, so maybe he is starting to extend a little bit more. But, you look at the outing against Tennessee, inning and a third. Now, he got beat up pretty bad there. Against Kentucky, 2 1/3. They lifted him in the 3rd inning when he got into some trouble, loaded the bases, and they had to pull him. But it was never really designed for him to go deep. Before the Mississippi State outing, his longest outing of the year was 2 2/3. That was in relief, but they were using him as an opener. So I would expect him to kind of continue to do that. He's pitched well in that role. Why not roll him out there? If you do see Dylan Watts in that role, fastball, it's a 3-pitch mix. Fastball is going to be in the low 90s, might bump a mid-90 every now and then. He's got a good off-speed pitch in the low 80s and a breaking ball that'll flash in the high 70s. So that's what I'm kind of expecting there. The other interesting thing with Auburn, is where they go after him, because they were using Carson Myers, a lefty who's been their best arm in conference play, like in conference games only. He has a 3.8 ERA, which is tops on the Auburn team. And they had been backing him up, or backing Watts up with Myers, and it's a different look. Watts is your pretty lanky right-hander. Myers is a lefty with a kind of a three-quarters delivery or so. Maybe not quite three-quarters, but it's a different look, and they were having some success with that. And obviously Myers was having success. They've since kind of moved him into the rotation. So where do they go after Dylan Watts? That will be interesting to keep an eye on. For LSU, Game 2, obviously, we're expecting that to be Luke Holman. If Gage Jump goes Game 1, Luke Holman's the logical choice to go game number 2. He will pitch a game start a game, obviously, this weekend, and when he does, it will be his 11th start and 11th appearance. 6-3, a 2.78 ERA, 55 innings pitched, 18 walks, 79 strikeouts. The opponent hitting just 181 off of Holman. Holman needs a big bounce back again. I mean, this is the third time you've been in this spot with him coming home after a struggle on the road. Whether it was the Mississippi State outing where he battled hard, his defense let him down, but he gave up 10 hits, right? I mean, he didn't miss many bats in that game, and that was an outlier for him, obviously, up to that point, and really kind of has been all year. Whether it was the Arkansas game where, again, he battled really hard, but he walked 5 guys and allowed 5 leadoff men to reach. I call that struggling on the road. Now you're coming off the outing against Missouri on the road, which was his worst outing of the season. I mean, walks were a problem, gave up 7 runs. 2 out base runners were a huge issue. 2 out runs were a huge issue. He couldn't get off the field. The interesting thing is, when you go back and you look at how it went for Holman coming back off those outings, when he got home, it was really good. Remember the outing after the state one? That was Florida. He was pretty darn dominant. Struck out 13 that night in 6 innings. All right, after the Arkansas outing, you come home and you face Vanderbilt. Remember how that one went? He was pretty darn good that night too. 5 2/3, didn't walk anybody, 10 strikeouts. That's what you need from Luke Holman this week. You need him to bounce back and show he can be that guy. And when you go back out on the road in 2 weeks, we'll worry about the fact that, he's struggled. He has struggled on the road, and he's been much better at home. So I am expecting a bounce back outing from Luke Holman this week because he has been so good at home against LSU. At home at the box. Now, that's where you get into the whole dynamic we've talked about previously, where if Gage Jump goes out there and gets you a win, you have Luke Holman behind him, that can set you up for a lot of success potentially in winning a series. So I would imagine, again, you stick with that for all the reasons we kind of just laid out, whether it's rest, routine, it's what you've done the last 2 weeks, you kind of got them on that schedule. But again, Holman's been so good at home, and he's proven to be able to bounce back strong after the rough road outing there. Why not just keep him in the same spot? For Auburn, this is where it gets a little interesting. You've had, like I said, you've had so many different guys slide in and out of the rotation. You've seen Cooper McBride in this spot, or Connor McBride in this spot. It's just you've seen Carson Myers a little bit maybe in this spot. The last 2 weeks, it's been Bauman. It's been Tanner Bauman, left-handed arm. I would imagine maybe you go back to that again. He's a guy that's moved into the rotation, was thought to be one of Auburn's best pitchers coming into the season. Hadn't necessarily panned out, but he has pitched better recently, so they've moved him into the rotation. Funky delivery from the lefty, 3/4. He delivers the ball standing very straight up as well. It doesn't look like there's a lot of drive. It looks like a very uncomfortable at bat for lefties when you look at left on left there. Whether he starts or not, you will see him this weekend, but I would imagine we'll project it that they just kind of keep that the same. He's been in the rotation the last 2 weeks. And he's got a nice slider that he can play off of the fastball, but the key is he has struggled a little bit with command of that pitch. So if he doesn't have it, he's going to get himself into trouble because the fastball, it's not overpowering. It'll be in the low 90s, high 80s, low 90s. from Bauman. But that's, I imagine, who you would see. Now, here's the other part of that. Auburn has been consistent the last 2 weeks in following up Bauman with John Armstrong. That is a name that should be very familiar to anyone listening to this. He has been at Auburn for a long time. He's a veteran arm, and we talk a lot. We talked about it with Watts, and what they were doing with Watts and Myers. It's a different look. You have the funky delivery from the left side from Bauman. You have an even funkier delivery from the right side from Armstrong. It is sidearm, and it'll run up the low 90s, probably top out 93, 94, but it's consistent there with the fastball. Again, veteran arm that's been in big spots, and that has worked out well for Auburn. They haven't really won games behind it, but it's worked better for them. Like, I look at the game last week against Mississippi State. They did that. They only allowed 3 runs total in that game. They lost 3-1, but they only allowed 3 runs total in that ball game. So that is something I think you definitely could see is that combination. Game 3, I expect both teams to probably leave that to be determined. TBA, to be announced. For LSU, obviously, I think you've seen the blueprint they want to use. They'd love to have Nate Ackenhausen be able to go out there and get them off to a good start. He's done that 2 weeks in a row. But if you need Nate Ackenhausen, and I think he's also looked more comfortable in that role than maybe the long relief so far this year. But Axe looked at as one of their best arms. If they feel they need him to close out a series, they're going to use him. And that's absolutely the right move. But if you can get through the first 2 games, hopefully win them both, and you have Nate Ackenhausen left available, go ahead and start him there. If you don't have Ackenhausen available and you haven't used a guy like Thatcher Hurd, potentially go ahead and start him there. If you don't have Ack or Hurd available, but you have Javen Coleman, he started games, you can go ahead and throw him in there. So you have options, but I fully expect LSU to just run back the same rotation they have the last 2 weeks. Jump, Holman, TBA. Auburn, Carson Myers slid into that spot last week in the final game of the series and looked pretty good in that role. Auburn lost that game to State in extra innings. But, I mean, he looked strong. We talked a little bit about him. It's not an overpowering fastball, not really at all. It'll be, high 80s, but it can play up because he does have a good breaking ball. He's been Auburn's best pitcher in conference play. That creates the conundrum that you kind of look at that LSU's doing with Griffin Herring, where it's, okay, do you want that guy coming out of the bullpen to shut the door, or do you move him into the rotation? LSU's made it clear they're keeping Herring, in that role. Jay's talked over and over about it, where it's, I always want one of my best pitchers coming out of the bullpen. Griffin Herring's that guy for you right now. Carson Myers has been that guy for Auburn. They've made the choice, at least last week, to move him into the rotation. So we'll see if they stick to that. If it's not Myers, Chase also has started games for them. Joseph Gonzalez has started games for them, although he hadn't pitched since April 16th. They have other options. If it's not Myers, I think it would be Alsop. And that's a name that should also be very familiar. Alsop started a game last year against LSU. I believe it was his first start of his career. It was opposite Paul Skeens. Auburn pitched off. Alsop's got a huge arm. The fastball can get up to 97, 98. It'll live mid-90s, though, 95, 96. It can get a little flat on him from time to time, so it absolutely can be hit. The slider, again, can be hit or miss. The curveball, when he's got it, is a really, really good pitch. Alsop showed himself well last year against LSU in that outing. I think went deeper than many thought he would and held down a really good LSU lineup. He kind of had everything working. So that is, again, a name that you should be very familiar with. Because we kind of just went through everybody like that, there's not really many guys left to go through on Auburn's pitching staff. I will highlight Parker Carlson. He is second on the team in appearances, but leads the team in appearances out of the bullpen specifically, a guy they've leaned on an awful lot. Out of conference has been much better than conference play, but it has not stopped them from going to him. So that's a guy that you will absolutely see this weekend if you're LSU, is Parker Carlson, and he's been through the wars, y'all. That's a junior righty. It's also a very popular name at Auburn. It feels like there's a Carlson on some Auburn team every single year. But that's a guy that you will see. I will tell you, He did pitch very, very well in his last two outings. They were at Mississippi State, shutout ball in both. So it's a guy they'll use multiple times in a weekend as well. In fact, they've done that already twice this year. So that's definitely somebody to look out for. Connor McBride's the other guy I would highlight. He's been in and out of the rotation. Low 90s fastball. He's got a really good cutter. That's kind of the pitch to really watch out for Connor McBride. And he's a dark horse to slide back into that rotation this week. But the cutter is really the pitch to look out for there. And then, I mean, there's names you should be familiar with. Joseph Gonzalez is definitely a name you should be familiar with here for Auburn. Christian Herberholtz is a name. Zach Crotchfeld is a name. But overall, Auburn has an ERA as a team just south of 6. In SEC play, it's over 8. They are last in conference-only ERA. It's teams hitting over 350 off of Auburn in SEC play. LSU's offense looks to kind of be turning a corner right now. They need to keep that going. Like, there is plenty of opportunity to score runs. The Box should play offensive this weekend. LSU needs to keep this going on offense. For the first time all season, LSU has scored 6 or more runs in 5 straight games. Keep that going this weekend. You have plenty of opportunity against this Auburn pitching staff. Auburn offensively, and this is where it gets pretty confusing, because Auburn's got bats, y'all. Ike Irish, really good. Ike Irish was in the running for Freshman of the Year in the conference last year. He was a freshman All-American by 4 out of the 5 major publications. He was obviously freshman All-SEC. Like, he's a dude. And he's doing it again this year. 326, 11 homers. That's second on the team with 48 RBI. Cooper McMurray is a real left-handed threat. That's Auburn's first baseman. Had 14 homers last year, is leading Auburn in home runs again this year, and is their leading hitter. Both those guys' numbers have taken a little bit of a dip in conference play, but they're still the 2 best hitters in this lineup. The hitter in this lineup that is the most baffling to figure out why he's struggling is Bobby Pierce. And it was kind of the same thing last year when LSU faced Auburn. Bobby Pierce, the power numbers weren't there, but the average number was. It's a guy who hit well over 350 last year for Auburn as a senior. He's back for his grad year, and he's hitting 224. He's hitting well. He's hitting like 150, I think, in conference play. I can look that up real quick. 152 in conference play. But Bobby Pierce is a lot better than those numbers indicate. So when he steps into the box, you better be on high alert there. Mason Mainers for Auburn, hitting over 300 overall in the season. Numbers have taken a dip in conference play, but that's a guy you have to definitely highlight. And then Chris Stanfield. That's a name that everybody should remember because he killed you last year as a true freshman. And he was hitting like 240. And you couldn't keep him off base. And he catches everything in center field. He's a great player. Elite speed in the outfield and on the base paths. You have to keep him off. And speaking of elite speed, elite base running, let's talk about Cooper Weiss. Cooper Weiss hitting 243 in conference play. Not great. You look at it overall, Cooper Weiss is hitting 292. Much better. But the big thing here is keeping him off base. He's hitting leadoff for Auburn, and he leads the SEC in stolen bases with 26. You have to keep Cooper Weiss off base. If you do that, Stanfield is really kind of the only other runner in the Auburn lineup that you have to worry about. And he's hitting down towards the middle now. But those 2 guys, they will take off, and Weiss has been the best in the conference at doing so. 26 out of 31. So I say all of that about Auburn's lineup to tell you, yeah, they're only hitting 274. And yeah, when you look at it in conference play, it's worse than that. It's at 247. That's 11th in the league. All of that. Throw it out the window. Ball that up, crumple it up, light it on fire, throw it out a window. I don't care. It doesn't matter. They've got players in that lineup. They can put a lot of pressure on you. Auburn has scored their runs in bunches. Like, when Auburn has scored, it has normally been in bunches. They were down 4-0 to Kentucky. Bam, 4-spot tied the game. Auburn got outslugged by Texas A&M this year. I think everybody thinks Texas A&M is pretty good, right? It's the number one team in the country. Auburn did not score less than 7 runs in that series in any game. They just gave up too many. They gave up 9, 12, and 12, I think. I don't have it in front of me anymore. They could score. So LSU's pitching staff, they've taken strides in the last 11 games. An ERA of 3.50, a full run lower than the overall ERA, and about more than 3 runs lower their conference ERA. So keep that going, because this is gonna be a test. Like, I expect Auburn to score runs this weekend, because like I said, I think the box will play plenty offensive enough. It's that time of year. So this is going to be a big test. LSU's offense, you should put up runs. Pitching, we're going to see how real the success you've started to have in those last 11 games is facing this Auburn lineup. Throw the numbers out the window. They're really good. They've got a lot of guys who can threaten you in a lot of different ways, 1 through 9. So that's actually the matchup I'm most excited to see, is LSU's pitching versus Auburn's offense. All right, keys and a series prediction. Here's your keys. Key number 1, develop consistency. That's it. I mean, that's what I got. We did a whole show about LSU trending up and looking like they're ready to turn a corner, and can they make the run? And the trends were positive, and that episode was deservedly, the praise was deservedly shown there. But the disclaimer we threw out was the one area they still lack is consistency. LSU needs to avoid what happened Saturday at Missouri when they face Auburn at the box. If you get that game 1 win, come out strong. LSU has not won 2 games in a row in conference play all year. That's the first step in developing consistency. Can LSU win the first 2 games this weekend? I want to see that. Because everyone wants to throw out the S word with this series, and I get it. But I'll go back to where we started. LSU's been better than Auburn the last 2 years and has lost both of those series, has found a way to lose both of those series. Something's going to have to change. Now, how does LSU start to develop that consistency? Keep on the track that you're on, but what have we been saying for the pitchers? I told you I was going to mention it every single time we did a preview, so I'm going to mention it right here. Keep the leadoff guy off base and stop allowing runs with 2 outs. Get off the field. When you have a chance to get off the field, when you have a chance to put a hitter away with 2 strikes, do it. You don't always have to strike him out. Use your defense. I know that's been easier said than done this year for LSU at some points, but get off the field. Like, that extends to the defense and the pitchers. Get off the field when you have the chance. They make the pitch, you make the play. Offensively, I'll highlight the guys we've highlighted. I want to see these specific guys continue on the stretch. Paxton Kling. Paxton Kling is hitting .294 in his last 11 games, and he's also drawn 9 walks. Keep that up. The bats are looking better. It looks like he's really kind of starting to figure it out a little bit. Can he keep going against a rough pitching staff? Stephen Milam. Milam is on a 6-game hitting streak, I believe, and has a hit in 11 of his last 12 games and has now found the fence twice. He's even got a few hits in there from the right side. Can he keep going? Because that's really lengthened your lineup. Ashton Larson. Ashton Larson is your leading hitter in conference play now. He has enough at-bats to where he counts toward the statistics, and he's also top 10 in the SEC in batting average at .395. He had a bit of a rough night in the midweek. Don't care. He's been awesome. Can he stay hot and keep going? Because, again, that has lengthened your lineup. And then either Bingham or Pearson, whichever guy they decide to play in that third corner outfield spot, how do you do? And I think you see both of them. When you're facing the righties, I think you'll see Pearson. If you face Bauman, a lefty, or Myers, a lefty, I think you'll see Bingham, because LSU has just gone right-handed heavy against left-handed starting pitching this year. It's just what they've done. But those are the guys I really highlight. I expect Jared Jones to have a good weekend. I expect Tommy White to have a good weekend. I'd like to see Hayden Travinski pick it up a little bit more, but, Travinski's a guy who can still strike fear in any opposing pitcher when he steps into the box. Consistency. So what happens? Well, I am, if nothing but consistent, so I will take LSU 2 out of 3. Until LSU proves to me that they can sweep somebody, I'm not going to pick them to do it. I don't like picking sweeps to begin with, and like I said, until they prove they can do it, I'm not going to pick one. This team has lacked consistency. That's the one thing they have to improve on. If they're going to sweep somebody, they'll improve on it. But I do like LSU to get 2 out of 3 from a bad Auburn team at home. So that's my official prediction. Give me LSU 2 out of 3, and they'll be right on track with where we've been projecting them down the stretch in conference play. It won't be great. You'd be 7-14, but 7-14 is a lot better than 3-12, and it's a lot better than 5-13. Would you love to be 8-13? Absolutely. We'll see if they can get the consistency down to do that. Put me down for LSU 2 out of 3. We'll have you covered here wall to wall on Musso at the Box all throughout the weekend. So get subscribed up to the YouTube channel. Smash the like button if you haven't already. Get subscribed up to on your favorite podcast app as well. Follow me on social media and be here next time for more Musso at the Box.